Good afternoon to you all. I'm here in Heights Park, and I felt an obligation to take this opportunity to follow in the footsteps of some of the great Guyanese who've spoken here, such as Walter Rodney, Forbes Burnham, Chetty Jagan. And at this point in time, what is going on in Guyana is wholly unacceptable. We have become so divided. We have become so filled with friction and animosity that it's literally become a multi-racist society. One that doesn't consider, where the leadership doesn't consider themselves as leading Guyana, but leading some particular demographic or group. And the situation is getting worse, particularly now for the African Guyanese under this current administration led by the People's Progressive Party. And we have to take a stand against this, not just for African Guyanese, but for all Guyanese. And it is time that the petty and ad hominem attacks are not allowed, not in the sense that we're trying to prevent free speech, but in the sense that we're trying to uplift the nation and focus on the problems we have. We have to talk about race to get past race. We have to learn to share in the patrimony of Guyana. We cannot have a budget where 90% of one demographic group benefits and 10 benefits, and the other 10% get 10%. Recently, I've been called a racist. I've been called unsavory character by the current Prime Minister, Mark Phillips. I've been called, that I'm acting out of self-interest by the Minister of Finance, Ashley Ali. And those are the ones who are actually holding the reins of office. Some actually have the power to make decisions, but some are really just window dressing, where they're put in power primarily because of their skin color or their ethnicity. And this is the other problem we have, where we have institutionalized a kind of racial cockpit, a racial core, where within each major party you have, for one group of the two major parties, the head has to be of a particular ethnicity, and then the second person, who is really just a rubber stamp, is the number two. And it goes for both parties. And we have to move away from this kind of institutionalizing of will lead and perpetuate racism. And I say to you here from Heights Park, from one of the most celebrated and revered places, where persons like Marcus Garvey and Kenyatta and our own Walter Rodney have spoken loud and clear about the need for multiculturalism, multi-ethnicity, and multiracial approach to governance. And that is where the problem lies. Right now, you have a lot of pseudo experts commentating on oil and environmental issues related to our massive oil find, because Guyana is now the fastest growing economy in the world. We have over 12 billion barrels of oil. Though we have a lopsided and disadvantaged and cockroach contract with ExxonMobil primarily, it has reduced us to the point where ExxonMobil is running the country. And whichever administration goes in, they don't have the backbone, it seems, because we've had two administrations who were in office or are in office that could, by decree, that could, by their willingness to oppose this draconian contract adjusts the royalty rate from 2% to at least 15%. Right now what we have is Exxon is getting 98% of the monies that come out from the contract. And they've put in front of that all kinds of pre-contract costs that are unauditable, and we simply don't have the resources and the personnel to do it. So a simple solution is to just give us 15%, and then they can do the rest. We take the 50% off the top, and that's the simple solution. But beyond that, what is more important, what is absolutely necessary is governance for the people. Not governance for a particular demographic, a particular group. This is destroying the country and will cause conflict and crisis and confrontation. We don't want to go back to the 1960s where there is communal violence and burning and looting. But if we continue along this path where African Guyanese are being subjugated, marginalized, they cannot get contracts for big projects, they're being disenfranchised. You have Prime Minister Mark Phillips saying that they gave out 25 contracts to African Guyanese to build bridges. These are $1 million and $2 million contracts, while they're giving Indian Guyanese multi-billion-dollar contracts. So you see, there's already a gap. The Indian Guyanese have, by stint of their hard work and the historical connections, coming to Guyana as contractors and not as enslaved people in chains, have always had been in a stronger position to become entrepreneurs and maximize opportunities to get into business and fortunately dominate a people who have been so divided culturally, who've been slaughtered, but who really built Guyana as we know it from the 17th century. So I am pleading to you to don't go for this mantra that, and it's not about me, that this is about racism and who's racist and who's not racist, but we have to say the words that are absolutely true. We have to say the PPP is currently conducting racist policies against the African Guyanese. It's not to say that a particular individual like the president or the vice president or the hierarchy of the PPP is racist. As a group, as a party, their conduct, their policies, the budgetary allocations result in the disenfranchisement of African Guyanese. We have a case where the population of Region 6 is about 100,000 people. The population of Region 4 amounts to about 230,000 people. And yet the regional allocation for Region 6 is double what it is for Region 4. So these are the atrocities that are going on. And if you speak out, you're attacked. I was really shocked to see someone saying that I must publish the SOPs for the 2020 elections. SOPs for who? For APNU AFC. When at the time I was standing shoulder to shoulder with, after the elections, with Barry Jack Dio, Mark Phillips, and many other, and Irfan Ali, and many of the other PPP leaders like Anil. I was speaking at Red House. Prior to the elections, I was as an invited guest to pronounce on social issues, when it was the appointment of Patterson or the the no confidence motion. And it was I who, on the evening when they were trying to pass have the transition done, I told the then opposition leader, I said, you absolutely need to publish the SOPs that the PPP have collected, because that would make people realize and have the actual, evidence, visual evidence, that the PPP had clearly won the 2020 elections based on those SOPs that have not been compromised, unlike what was being put out by AFC. So when you have the Minister of Finance hiding under the rubric of the Ministry of Finance, it is appalling for him to make a whole host of hominin attacks against me when I was publishing articles saying that the conduct of the AFC was inappropriate when they put Ashley Ali and Brassington in chains, and by the whisker of a cat they managed to stay out of jail. And I was willing to go to one of the leaders in AFC, my good friend Colonel Harmon, in case it reached that point. I was also part, going back about 10 years, part of the letter group that did a SOP, Statement of Polls investigation, into the anomalies that occurred for the 2011 elections, where you had people voting at private residences, people voting at mandirs, people voting, using lists that clearly need to be updated. Even Suraj Bali, in his wisdom, said that by the 2020 elections, we need to have a new electoral list. And that is absolutely necessary for the next elections. And we cannot keep waiting on ourselves to act. And our leaders, whether they're from the WPA, whether they're from APNU, whether they're from the one-man parties, have to oppose this subjugation, have to oppose this marginalization, have to oppose racist and discriminatory policies. And I call on you, my Guyanese brothers and sisters, Indian Guyanese, African Guyanese, European Guyanese, Chinese Guyanese, the indigenous people, the mixed races, to see the reality and don't get compromised and caught up in a title and a benefit that will it will not help mitigate the over 40% poverty in Guyana. It will not deal with communities that have been ignored. It will only perpetuate a larger wealth gap. And then there's the value gap, where the Africans are not seen as equal to the Indians in terms of getting jobs, particularly in the private sector, where you go into some institutions and you wonder if you're actually in a country with a multi-ethnic population. You see it in the banks, the insurance companies, and many other private sector organizations. One of the most appalling features of this, and shocking to me, was when I went into Roraima Airlines and I saw 95% of the staff were Indian Guyanese. And that organization was led then by the president of the private sector corporation, who is now a national security advisor to the president of Guyana. So, my colleagues, my comrades, my friends, we have to move forward. We have to go beyond. We have to first of all confront and overcome this pillorying and the pillorying of the African Guyanese. We have to share the patrimony it has been a windfall, like all the blood shed, all the labor, whether it's of the African Guyanese, the Indian Guyanese, over the centuries when we were colonized. Now we have this massive windfall of oil, and it can be used immediately for the people. There is no reason why every Guyanese can't get $5,000 annually. There is no reason for money to be sitting in the National Resources Fund when Guyanese are starving, when Guyanese are unemployed, when Guyanese have to become criminals in order to put food on the table. We're criminalizing the country. And who does it fall upon? Whose shoulders? It falls upon the shoulders or the backs of the African Guyanese. Primarily, there are many impoverished Indian Guyanese, but to a large extent, because of the nature of our, historical journey, and the fact that the enslavement, we're still damaged by it, is most of the burden has fallen upon the African Guyanese. Most of the journey has fallen upon the African Guyanese. And we have to, our leaders have to see this. And particularly the African Guyanese leaders can no longer be silent. And the fear in the community of speaking out, of losing a contract, of losing a client, of not getting an opportunity to participate in the patrimony of Guyana. We must not fear that. We are a large enough bloc in Guyana to bring the country to a standstill until our needs are met, until some semblance of fair play, some semblance of proper allocation of funds. Currently our budget is $6 billion. And I'm telling you, of the part of it is for capital expenditure, about 80 to 90% goes to the large contractors. And who are the large contractors? Indian Guyanese. Nothing wrong with monies going to Indian Guyanese. It should, but it should be, there must have some balance in this process. It cannot simply be that we are users of wood and fetchers of water, and as Mark Phillips says, builders of bridges. Is that all we can do? A colleague of mine, Nigel Hinds, mentioned the need for us to get subsidized loans. We must not necessarily have to show collateral, we must just have a good project. The wealth gap is so huge that we need a kind of action that will lift up. It's not necessarily trying to close the gap, but just lift us up to the point where we can have good jobs, we can participate in the entrepreneurship needed for the wealth to spread. The PPP has to stop trying to dominate the public sector, where African Guyanese can get the type of livelihood that is sustainable. They have virtually total control of the private sector. If you have the 100 wealthiest Guyanese in Guyana, 3 of them at most might be in that group. That is how the wealth gap is right now. If you have 15 buildings that are 10 stories high or 6 to 8 stories high, none of them are owned by African Guyanese, and it's not an Indian Guyanese fault that is the case. But I'm saying that good governance would create opportunities to give us access to capital, but actually, support and create the climate so that African Guyanese can also be Guyanese, be part of the success, benefit from the windfall. The bias and the prejudice is totally unacceptable. And you send out these vulgar attacks against the leaders who are trying to speak up for their people, whether it's David Hinds, Lincoln Lewis, Nigel Hinds, Aubrey Norton, and instead of dealing with what they're saying, you're dealing with attacking them personally as racist. Can you imagine an individual who has a massive platform in Guyana for the last 15 years and who has, he's jumped the fence many times, nothing wrong with that. You can have a change of view. We grow, each day we're learning. But for him to call Granger a coward and a failure, that's Freddie Kissoon doing that. Now why is he particularly always attacking African leaders like if he is some expert on African people? To me that's so insulting and disrespectful. And these people who come forward to attack African Guyanese from the government and attack me, who stood with them shoulder to shoulder. I recall distinctly when we were at the climatic stage of the transition and we were in a room and the president came, the opposition leader Bara Jagdeo came in and he said, well, it seems like they've virtually kidnapped Claudette Singh and we have to do something about it, because she was in there from like 8 in the morning to about 6 p.m. and we decided they had the police blocking the entryway, and I had my two aides from Change Guyana, which was the party. I was the chairman of party led by Robert Badal, and Mishka Burat was the prime ministerial candidate. And I went with myself, Bara Jagdeo, Mark Phillips, and my 2 aides that were with me. And the police were standing in front of us with batons. And I was the one who pushed past them first to go up those stairs, followed by my 2 aides, Bara Jagdeo and Brigadier Mark Phillips. And we went up and we actually got into the room that Claudette Singh was in. And I don't know the impact of that, but what they're trying to do now is erase that history of my participation in that process by calling me a racist. And that is so far from the truth. It is not in my DNA, this is not in my genealogy. I grew up in a community that we played sports together, whether it was hockey, basketball, volleyball, table tennis. I played all those sports with people from all ethnicities. And the camaraderie to this day lasts forever. And I'll say one more thing. I recall when Chris Finance was receiving one of the national awards at the Culture Center on the Granger, and this was back around 2016, 2017. After he received the award, he came to me and he said, keep writing. And you know who I was writing against? The Abdu AFC administration. Not writing against them, making the case that they were not governing in the best interest of the people. And now I make the case that the PPP administration has accelerated racism compared to any other previous administration. And I use the acronym ARP, Accelerated Racist Program, by the PPP to show the difference between what Desmond Hyde did with his Economic Recovery Program, ERP. I further made the case that what we have going on now justifies the elections that were rigged from 68 to 1992 under the Hyde-Barnum era, and the attempts by the Granger administration to do just that. And I'm saying it is being justified by the conduct of the PPP, because what is the point in putting a party in power that will now isolate and subjugate you So people like Mingo, people like Lowenfield have been tortured and given awards for what they've tried to do. There should be monuments to them simply because what they were doing was to prevent racism and racist policies against the Guyanese people. You have the president of Guyana, Irfan Ali, going into an African village without following proper protocol, proving his merit as a non-racist by saying that he has an African Guyanese woman working for him. I mean, how disgraceful, how disrespectful that is, and asking a lady to stand in her African community. There is a word association, and you find that many of the political leaders of the PPP like to use the phrase or the words like stupid and lazy and when they're talking about African Guyanese leaders. All of this shows that they need to look deep within themselves and say, this is it. You have the power to do it. I am not anti-PPP or anti-PNC. I am pro-Guyanese. And I pledge with you on this occasion, and I've come here to Hyde Park at the Speaker's Corner to make this point loud and clear. We need to unite. I just posted on my Facebook page a tribute to Walter Rodney, and the sentiments that I expressed in it speaks to the kind of people we need in our leadership. And I thank you for listening to me.